Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is one in a series that I'm doing about particle systems in the Unreal Engine using the Niagara plugin. And in this one, we're going to look at the render section. So the setup that I've got here is the same as at the end of the previous video. So if you've been following through in series, you'll have seen this. Just a quick explanation. I've got a simple-ish particle system here, which is a sprite system spawning a fair size sprites in a cuboid area, a box location. And they've got a little bit of velocity out from the point, so they move around. They shrink over time, and they slowly fade over time as well. And they have a color change from kind of pinkish purples and oranges to green towards the end of their life. Most of that is going to be irrelevant in what we do. We're going to have a look at this bottom section here, render. So at the moment we're rendering as a sprite, and all the rest of the series has been using the sprite renderer. I want to quickly show you mesh rendering and ribbon rendering, and I want to do that quickly for three reasons. One is that I don't want to end up getting mired in lots and lots of different settings and lots of different things that you can do. I just want to give you the outline principles. And another reason is because I myself have not dug that deeply into these different values and things that you can get into, so I don't want to embarrass myself. And the third one is if I can get finished nice and early, I can go and have some lunch. So let's get going. So we've got a sprite render at the moment, and I'm just going to disable that. We could, in fact, bin it. And I'm going to replace that with a mesh renderer. There are several different renderers here, obviously. Sprite is useful. Component, not sure what it does. Light, I'm guessing, does light emission. We're going to look at mesh, and then we're going to look at ribbon. So put a mesh renderer in, but nothing's happening yet. We can't see anything, and that's because we don't know what mesh we're using. So I hope you're used to the idea that in Unreal, a 3D model is called a mesh or a static mesh. And we're just going to choose one of the standard assets here. We're going to choose a cube. And now you can see on the preview, it's not got a material on it, but they're being created, and it's using similar effects to the ones that we were using before. However, the scale sprite size is having no effect, so let's disable that. The scale colors having no effect, so let's disable that. And this color here is having no effect, so I'm going to disable that. We could show what happens with gravity force. If we put that in, it's kind of as you might expect. But we're going to leave that. And if we go to initialize particle, in a previous video, we mentioned these mesh attributes here. So the mesh scale mode is unset. The sprite attributes are not having any effect anymore. So we can switch that to unset. And we're going to change this to random uniform, which gives us size randomly over a range. And they're quite big. I want to shrink these down, so I'm going to do a size between 0.1 and size 0.3, and that's more manageable. Okay. And it's resolved a material on that. Oh, interestingly, they seem to be potentially long and thin. I wonder why that's the case. If I go looking in that, then I might find that something odd is happening. Let's look at how it's in the world. I think that's an artifact of the way that it shows that preview, because in the world they look like cubes to me, which is fine. Let's go back in, and I want to apply a different texture to that. So that cube has got a default texture on it. And if I want to change that, I'm in the mesh renderer here, and I'm looking for this, but it's a bit hard. easy to miss. Override materials, and so we want to put our own material in there. And it asks for an array of materials, quite why I'm not sure, but we can easily override it by sticking one in the first slot. So I just click, and it produces this material here. And I'm just going to choose, so there's I'm just going to take off a couple of options there, because I want to show that later. So I'm looking for the nice dynamic materials that we've got in there. There's the hex pulse. That's part of the starter content. So it's taking a second or two to change that. And then we've got this material that changes over time. The blue changes into slow pulse. Let's have a look at that in the world. So it's very similar to the sprite, except of course it's rendering a mesh, but we've just applied a simple material to it. Most times when you're using a mesh, you probably want a specific material, and a lot of the manipulation that you want to do will be inside the material, and so to create a dynamic material, and you can link in various various parameters through from materials if you wanted to. But I don't want to show that. If you do the quick start for Niagara, which I will link in the description down below, then you will see that using a dynamic material which exposes variables that can be used then in the emitter. So that's a mesh renderer, and we're going to move on and have a very quick look at a ribbon renderer. So let's take off the mesh renderer, and delete it, and we're going to stick in a ribbon renderer. And immediately we've got kind of crazy things going on here. Let's have a look at that in the world, because you get lots and lots of things being created here. And it's a great mess. Okay, so doing anything meaningful with ribbons beyond something simple is quite complex, and I strongly recommend Unreal's ribbon renderer tutorial, creating a ribbon effect. Again, I'll link it down at in the description. Yeah, and I just want to show you some very simple stuff in the ribbon renderer. So the first thing that I want to do is to go to initialize particle and get rid of that because it's not helping us, because there is a specific version that you can use for ribbons instead. So initialize ribbon. And at the moment, we've got a kind of burst thing going on. So let's have a bit of a look at this. We've got an infinite loop. I think that's probably going to be fine. Let's take off the burst and let's do a spawn rate instead. Okay. And that's got 0 at the moment, so I'm going to up that to start at 20. Anything happening? Yes, something, but it's kind of widespread and difficult because it's flicking. So part of the problem that we've got here is this box location, which is huge. So I'm going to get rid of that and put in a sphere location instead. Location, and keep it quite small. Sphere location. There we go. So that is more recognizable as a ribbon effect. I'm going to change the material on that. If I can remember where, I should be able to here. So yes, the materials in the top of the rendering section. And I said before, I unticked a couple of options here. You can expand the range of what's available here by clicking on Show Engine Content and Show Plugin Content. And in fact, there's a default ribbon material, which is quite useful for this. So there we go. So that looks like a kind of reasonable ribbon thing. There's the velocity being applied. So if we take off that velocity, It shouldn't spread out in the same way. And that looks a bit like somebody weaving a sparkle around in space. Yeah, which is quite cool. So what's happening is that when it spawns a point and is doing it at the spawn rate, it actually creates a ribbon from the last point to the new point. And over time, the end tail of the ribbon then also disappears and dissipates. I'm going to put the um, particle update, the colour back in because that gives us a nice coloration effect a little bit. In fact, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the initial colour to be different. Initialize ribbon, and we're going to use a random colour. So random range linear colour, and we're going to make it between bad and give us a red. Get the right colours always a bit of a that's kind of brown. I want a red. Yeah. That's between red and white. That'll do. Um, so what's happening is that it has this continuous ribbon, and it instantly flicks from uh, one lead point to the next lead point, and the tail point is slowly disappearing to in in time as well. And it's just getting to the end of the simulation when it flicks and it reappears. Now, I hope it should be actually continuous. So if we go and look at the real thing in the real world, it's above our heads. Has it got that flick in? No, it keeps going. And what it's doing is it's moving pretty much instantaneously from the front position to a new front position. And we can make it go crazy by giving it a faster spawn point, so it will choose points to move to much quicker. So this is done in the spawn rate. Let's give it 100, and that becomes like a crazy ball of running rhythm. If we want to slow it down a lot, move to something as slow as 2. And that's the tail is catching up with the front quite quickly. Make it 5. It'll be quite jerky because it's just slowly creating these new places to go to. And I'm just quickly looking for anything that'll give us the length of the ribbon or the amount of time that it stays. Now, I think that's probably in the lifetime. So let's, if we, what happens if we change that lifetime to 5? Yes, it's more persistent. So that keeps going. What is hard to do is to do a smooth curve along a determined path. And you can do that by linking in variables and from over here, the emitter lifespan, emitter age, for example, and the tutorial in that's provided by Unreal as a really good example of that. So I'm not going to rehash that. The last thing I'm going to show you in the ribbon is to go to the ribbon renderer. There's loads and loads of stuff in here, most of which I don't understand. But I want to go to this tessellation and the curve tension thing, which is, this is what's giving it the kind of roundedness as it goes to new points. And if we change that from automatic to disabled, you'll see how that has changed. So it just goes flicks from point to point with corners in it. So that's a way of controlling that. And of course, you could do custom mode. And as we increase the curve tension, it makes it a bit more spiky. Okay. So That's a quick look at a mesh renderer and a ribbon renderer. To get specific effects, you are going to need to get deeper than I've just done here. What I was really aiming to do was to give you the principles and the outlines so you can use that knowledge to go on from here to understand better what's been done in other tutorials elsewhere. So it's time for my lunch, so that's it from me for now.